Today on Hands on Photography, we're going to go outside and take some photographs of the big blue sky. Well, not really the big blue sky, just that beautiful floating rock that's out there, the moon. We're going to talk about moon photography and how you can capture moon photography with whatever camera you're using. Yes, I said whatever camera you're using. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy smancy mirrorless or DSLR. Y'all stay tuned.
This is TWiT.
This episode of Hands on Photography is brought to you by BetterHelp. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/hop. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Pruitt, and this is Hands on Photography here on TWiT TV. Hope y'all are doing well. I'm unbelievable as always. I love to sit there and share different tips and tricks that's going to help make you a better photographer, better post-processor, because they both go hand in hand. Yeah, today I'm going to talk about a project that I worked on here and there and, just in my leisure, if you will. But then I started getting some questions over on social media. I posted some photographs of the moon because, it's really, really hard to get photographs of the moon here in Northern California. The sky is always hazy, or the moon is like ridiculously far away in the night sky. It's like it's so when I get a chance to see it, I usually take a picture of it just because I don't see it very often. But yeah, someone tagged me on Instagram and said, "Hey, Ant, do you mind walking through how we can shoot moon photography?" And I said, well, yeah, sure. I'll work that out for you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so moon photography. That is a interesting, beautiful, heavenly body way out there in space that when you can see it, it's amazing to see it, especially when it goes through the different phases, whether it's the crescent or half or what have you. And photographing it is quite challenging because you're battling with the distance of it first and foremost, being able to actually get it in focus and showing up on your frame. Next, you're battling with light pollution and things going on in the sky, depending on where you are. And then you're also battling with the light that is reflecting off of the moon itself that will cause some serious problems with your photograph as you're trying to snap an image. So I want to talk about just walking through and getting you squared away with shooting moon photography. All right. So a couple things to consider. You're going to need some sort of long lens if you're trying to get a moon shot and actually show some details of it. If you're on a full frame or APS-C sensor, I highly recommend getting something at least in the 300 millimeter focal length, if you can. If you can go even further, reach on that up to 400 or 600, that's even better. There are some challenges with that, but if you can get at least 300 millimeters, you're going to be able to really get it in focus and get some nice views and nice details of the moon. Okay, so you got that out of the way. Me, for this shoot, I was using a Canon 100 to 400 millimeter lens. The folks at Lens Rentals sent it on over for me to do for this show. Thank you for that. But yeah, I used the 100 to 400, and this is a long telephoto lens that also has image stabilization built right into it. Why is image stabilization important? Well, if you're not using a tripod and you're using a really, really long focal length, man, the micro jitters will show up every single time on your shot. Unless you're someone that's got some biceps like mine, then that's a different story. I don't use the tripod for this particular shot, but I highly recommend most people do use a tripod for shooting the moon photographs. It's just so much easier and really does cut down on a lot of the errors that comes from the micro jitters. And if you can get a lens that's image stabilized, it's just an added bonus. But yeah, I'm using the 100 to 400 on here. And the actual aperture on it, it doesn't necessarily have to be a lens that's got a really, really wide aperture. It doesn't have to be an f2.8 or anything like that. And you'll see here in a moment when we go through some of the examples of what happens here. But when you're shooting the shot, after you get everything framed up and hopefully in focus, you really have to think about the exposure triangle. Now, we talked about the exposure triangle way back in the beginning of hands-on photography. I think it was like episode 2, maybe 3. Mr. Victor has that stuff for me. He always does. Yeah, but we talked about the exposure triangle where your shutter speed is going to make a difference in how much light actually hits your image sensor. So a slower shutter speed is going to allow more light in. A faster shutter speed is going to not allow as much light. And then you have the aspect of dealing with ISO and the aperture. Ideally with the aperture, that's sort of, it depends on what you're looking for. I like to aim somewhere around f5.6 or so, something like that. If I'm really trying to get it a little sharper, I may push it up to f8. It depends on your lens. Some lenses shoot a little more sharper at f8. Most of the lenses that I play with, f8 seems to be the magic number for a really sharp image. But f5.6 is generally okay as well. And again, all of that's doing is just changing the depth of field as well as changing just how much light is passing through and hitting your image sensor. Because when you go to shoot the moon, you don't want to deal with a lot of light because the moon is reflecting light right back at your camera. So what ends up happening is people will grab their camera and take a picture of the moon and it's a blown out image. And that's totally defeating the purpose. Next, you have to consider the ISO. Again, you're already battling with a bright object in the sky. So dealing with ISO means you're going to put a little bit of fake light, simulated light, if you will, for your sensor. And we don't want a lot of that, so I would highly recommend shooting maybe ISO 400, no more than ISO 1600 if you really have to. It just depends on the sky and depends on the composition. So the main thing is the light is going to be a pain in your neck trying to shoot the moon. So without further ado, let's pause for a second, open up Lightroom and take a look at a couple images. This episode of Hands On Photography is brought to you by BetterHelp. Is something preventing you from achieving your goals? What interferes with your happiness? Well, check out betterhelp.com/hop. All right, folks. So right now it is holiday season here, and that's a good thing for a lot of people. But you know what? Sometimes it's a bit of a tough time for just as many people. And right now is the time to really take advantage of getting a better grip and understanding of your mental health. Okay. So BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist, and they'll connect you with a safe and private online environment to get everything squared away. So it's so convenient, and you can start communicating in under 48 hours. Seriously, it is really that quick. Now, please be advised, this is not a crisis line. It's not a self-help. It's a professional counseling that's done securely online. Send a message to your counselor at any time. You get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions, all without having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. I've been attending counseling sessions, and I've done it both in person and I've also done it virtually. And I've used BetterHelp, and it is so convenient and so simple. And quite frankly, it is really, really helpful. The process just is seamless. My counselor is available, just a few clicks away. I can send messages for checking in and things like that, and they can check in on me. I really do enjoy how this is done. This is not the traditional counseling sessions that you're used to. This is really, really great. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you need to. because sometimes, a counselor just may not be working out for you. So it's nice to have options to look at other counselors all right there on the platform. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. The service is available for clients worldwide, and you can find particular expertise you need online. Don't limit yourself to counselors located just near in your area. This is all worldwide. You'll find licensed professional counselors who are specializing in depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, sleeping, trauma, anger, family conflicts, LGBT matters, grief, self-esteem, quite a bit. And note, anything that you share is confidential, convenient, professional, and affordable. Check out the testimonials posted daily on their website. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So if you want to start living a happier life today, as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at BetterHelp.com/hop. So join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/hop. That way they know that I sent you from here at Hands On Photography, and we appreciate their support. Okay, so we are now inside of Adobe Lightroom, and these are some raw images. These have not been processed, but I wanted to just show you how things work regarding the actual exposure triangle and what happens when shooting the moon in a dark sky. Again, the light that's coming off of that moon is going to be your biggest challenge. And if you're looking at the screen here, you'll notice that I'm shooting at 1/125th of a second. Okay, so 1/125th of a second that's fast. That's fast for, like portraits or things like that, but it's not necessarily a fast shutter speed for shooting the moon. So let's skip on over to this next image and compare it. This next image, I shot it at 1/640th of a second. I can never say that. 1/640th of a second. Didn't change anything else. Still have the same aperture and ISO at 5.6 and 400, but speeding up that shutter, that means I'm letting less light come into this image. So if we zoom in on this, you can see there's a whole lot more detail, and there's not a lot of spiking of light hopping onto the histogram. I mean, the histogram over here on the upper right of the screen is pretty much blank, But if I go over here to this first image, it's pretty much the same frame, same focal length and everything, but a faster shutter speed. So the moon is reflecting so much more light. You can even see it on the histogram. There's a little bit of a white spike right here on the left in the shadows, but the detail is just not there. It's just not. So crank that shutter speed up and get that detail to pop through. So let's look at another image here. Let's pop out. We'll take a look at another one. Right. So this one, we have 1/500th of a second, but I changed the ISO. This is now an ISO of 800 versus an ISO of 400. And it's a little hard to tell on this because it's such a fast shutter speed. But ideally, you would start to see what's happening around the moon start to lighten up a little bit. The sky won't necessarily look black when you change that ISO, if your shutter speed is fast enough. Okay, so now let's pop out. We'll take a look at another one here. Okay, so this is the same ISO 800, but I'm speeding up the shutter even more, all the way down to 1,000th of a second. And this is probably my favorite one because of just how sharp and all of the details that I'm able to grab from this image. I didn't have to battle any of the reflective light coming off of the moon. Now, let's say you're just out and about and on a photo walk or whatever, and it's not totally dark outside, but yet you can still see the moon in the daylight sky. So what do? It's the same principle. So here is a shot shot at 1/50th of a second because you're thinking, all right, I can shoot this a little bit better. I have plenty of light out here, so I can be a little bit more judicious with my camera. So 1/50th of a second, ISO 320, because I don't need to simulate more light. But guess what? That is way too slow of a shutter. Way too slow. It's still just blowing it out. So what do? Speed up that shutter speed. Speed it up. And then I actually cranked the ISO all the way up to 1600. I said that's pretty much my limit. The reason I did that is because I wanted to see more of a blue background instead of a dark sky, and didn't change the aperture or anything like that. And what happens is I get a very, very nice photograph with details of the moon. Granted, there is some noise on here, but with noise reduction inside of your photo editor, you can clean that up and no one would even notice the difference. Now, let's look at something else here. So again, that's with using a APS-C camera or full frame camera or what have you, with a lens that is optimized for getting that kind of reach. Again, if you have that kind of reach, you can even crop in on it and still have some decent amount of details. But what about those of you that don't have cameras like that? What about those of you who don't have the cameras or those lenses, and all you have is your latest and greatest iPhone, or the latest and greatest, like me, the Pixel 6 Pro? You ever wanted to try to shoot the moon with the smartphone? Oh boy, it's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge. But the thing is, it is doable, but it takes just a little bit of patience, and you got to be a little bit deliberate on your shot. So I took my smartphone out and just snapped a couple images of the moon. And the trick is, when you're using your smartphone camera, tapping onto the screen allows you to lock in a focal point, but in most instances, it also allows you to adjust the exposure just by sliding your finger up and down or side, right and left, depending on what model phone that you're having, what OS you're running. And that is essentially changing the shutter speed as well as changing the ISO. It's not going to change the aperture because they have a simulated fixed aperture on these phones. But if you just dial it in and be as still as you possibly can, you can snap some moon photographs. And I'm going to go back to Lightroom and show you what I did. Okay, so as you can see from the metadata up here, this is a pixel image, and it's a JPEG, shot at 1/90th of a second, f3.5, using their little telephoto lens. And yeah, it looks okay, but it's not great. It definitely looks better than what smartphones used to do when it comes to moon photography, but it could be better. Again, think we're dealing with 1/90th of a second. That's way too slow, way too slow. So I dialed it in. Here's another view of it. I'm now shooting at 1/580th of a second and ISO 38. So a whole lot less light to deal with. And I'm able to get in on this and pull out some more details of the moon just from my smartphone. Now, this is only, roughly 12 megapixels or so? Yeah, roughly 12 megapixels. So it's not going to have the bestest of detail, but that's still pretty daggum good. Trust me, when you post this to Instagram or Facebook or wherever you like to post your images on social media, when you post it, it's going to look good. No one's going to do the pixel peeping like what we're doing right here. It's going to look good. But again, this is totally doable with your smartphone. Just take a few seconds and play around with the exposure options on your phone. And if you're able to mount your phone on a tripod, that is an absolute bonus. I highly recommend you do that if you can. I know everybody doesn't have tripods. I know everybody doesn't have tripods for phones in particular, but if you can get your hands on one, give it a try. I shot this handheld, but again, I've been practicing this stuff for quite a bit, so I'm able to pull it off a little easier than some folks. But yeah, moon photography, totally doable as long as you have the equipment ready and understand the exposure triangle and how to combat all of that reflective light coming off of the moon. Okay. I want to say thank you again to my folks over at Lens Rentals that's been so supportive of me and supportive of the show. Appreciate y'all sending over that lens. So head on over to lensrentals.com to try out amazing glass and camera bodies before you buy them. It's what I like to do all the time. It saves you a lot of money. If you can rent something and you realize you don't like it, you just send it back. Easy as that. But if you have any other questions, feedback, comment, feel free to shoot me an email, hop@twit.tv. Again, it's hop@twit.tv. And if this was your first time catching the show, thank you for joining in and welcome to you. Please consider subscribing to the show on whatever podcast app you're checking us out on. We're available on Apple, we're available on Spotify, or you can just go to our website and just view all of the subscription options right there. The website is twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP. Give me a follow over on the social medias, folks. I'd love to hear from you, just like the person that sent me this message about the moon photography. I am ant_Pruitt over on Instagram. I'm also ant_Pruitt over on Twitter. I love hearing from you. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for the tremendous support. Now, safely create and dominate, and also give a shout out to Mr. Victor too, y'all. He does such a great job keeping this show looking good and sounding good. Y'all take care. We'll see you later.
No ads, just the content. That's what you get when you join Club TWiT. You even get extras like TWiT Plus, our new bonus feed just for members, and exclusive access to the Club TWiT Discord community. Join now for just $7 a month and support TWiT as we continue to create top-notch podcasts you expect and deserve. We're just getting started, so be one of the first to join as we build Club TWiT from the ground up. You could be an early member. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit to learn more and sign up now. Thanks.